Hey everybody, Brett from AstartesGaming here, back with another Mountain Blade 2 Bannerlord developer blog video. Today we're checking out the blog from November 2nd, 2017, and we're looking at weapon physics. Apparently this is part one of, well, I guess we don't know how many, but we do know that there's more than one. So anyways, let's dive right in. Greetings warriors of Calradia. Mountain Blade's deep and intuitive combat system is one of the core features of our game. Our directional attacking and blocking mechanic is intuitive in the sense that it is easy to pick up, and deep in that it allows players to continuously develop and adapt their own fighting style through the use of feinting, chambering, and good footwork, including a well-timed kick. In previous Mountain Blade games, there is, however, an element of randomness in combat. Damage is calculated using a number of variables, and weapons are hard-coded to deal a randomly selected amount of damage from a predefined range before other factors are added to the equation, such as the attacker's weapon proficiency, the speed of the combatants, and the armor value of the unlucky soul on the receiving end of an attack. So something I don't think they explained very well there is there's actually quite a few factors that are added to that equation. They only list a couple, but weapon proficiency isn't the only stat that's involved. Certain skills such as like power strike or power draw, depending on the type of attack, can be implemented as well. And then if you do a lot of mounted combat, you'll know that speed bonuses are a big deal as well. You can actually get speed, actually it does say that, speed of the combatants, so they did mention that one. But you can get speed bonuses on foot as well. It's just a lot more difficult to do. On horseback it's much easier, and you know, very, very important when you're fighting with like a lance or any sort of pole arm on horseback, but also, you know, important when you're fighting with a sword as well. Less so when you're using, you know, like horse archery or something. But yeah, there's actually quite a few factors that go in there, and they just list a couple of them there. So anyways, they feel that for the most part this system works well, but there's still that one part of the damage calculation that can't be controlled or reliably predicted by the player. So that's something I actually didn't know. I always sort of assumed that there was RNG happening under the hood, but it wasn't ever clear because the weapons don't have damage ranges. They have a finite value, so your sword might have like a 36 thrust damage and like a 28 slash damage or swing damage. And that's not a range. Those are just, you know, 28 damage when you swing it versus 36 or whatever I said before when you thrust it. It's not like it's, you know, using numbers within those ranges. It's telling you that depending on the type of attack you use, that's what you're going to get. But apparently those numbers don't correspond to the actual values. The values are, I don't know exactly what the numbers are, but they could be like plus or minus like 4. So for example, when you did that thrust attack for 36 damage, it could be anywhere from like 32 to 40 potentially. I'm not sure exactly how the system works. I haven't like dug into the code to see what exactly they have, you know, happening under the hood there. But apparently that is no longer the case. So let's jump into the new system. In Mountain Blade 2 Bannerlord, we wanted to improve this aspect of combat to make it both fairer and easier for players to understand, especially in a multiplayer setting. We decided that the best way to go about this would be to make a physics-based system, which would take into account the physical properties of a weapon, and use a simulation to derive the combat stats, such as weapon speed and damage. We hope that this system will balance weapons in a more natural and realistic way. Another advantage for the, let me make sure you guys can still read this. Another advantage for the physical stat calculation is that it can be used in our new weapon crafting system. The physics-based system fits naturally with crafting because all we need to do is acquire the physical properties of crafted weapons and then feed these into the stat calculation system. This will, in turn, provide us with the stats for the weapon. When crafting a weapon, the player first selects a template. A sword, for instance, is made up of a blade, a guard, a grip, and a pommel. Each of these parts may give the weapon certain bonuses or penalties outside the physics simulation. A particularly large guard may increase the wielder's hand armor, for example. Each part also has certain physical properties that are used for calculations. Once the player selects each part, we combine the physical properties of the parts to make up the overall properties of the weapon. So these are the properties that are going to be factored into the actual damage calculations. So first off, we have the length, which is going to determine the overall reach of the weapon. Obviously, a short sword isn't going to reach as far as a longer polearm. Not actually factoring into the damage, though, just where the damage can be, allocated. The mass. This is important for thrust attacks and is used to determine the speed and power of thrusts. Light weapons are faster but have less energy less energy and cause less damage. Making the weapon heavier will slow it down but will also make it more powerful, up to a point. If too heavy and too slow, a weapon will make contact with your opponent before it could reach its full speed, making it feeble and ineffective. That actually doesn't make sense to me at all, for several reasons. So weight mass shouldn't really factor in that much. Well, it should factor in for thrusting, but not in the way that you would think. Basically, for thrusting, a lighter weapon is going to be more effective because you can accelerate it quicker. That's why, like fencing swords and stuff are very, very lightweight. Obviously, you're not trying to thrust through a person with a fencing sword, but all of the actual combat swords that those are derived from are very, very lightweight weapons. If you look at like rapiers and stuff, they're very, very lightweight thrusting swords. They're very long and narrow because you're trying to drive maximum force through a minimal size point. Whereas when you're swinging a weapon, that's when the mass is actually beneficial because you're building up greater centripetal force through a swing, and the more mass you have behind that, the harder it's going to hit. So at that point, it's a balance between having a weapon that's able to be wielded. You don't want a weapon so ridiculously massive or heavy that it's unwieldy to use, but the bigger it is, and of course you're still capable of moving it, the harder it's going to hit. So the way that they're talking about it here seems kind of counterintuitive. Yeah, making weapons heavier should slow them down, but it's not necessarily always going to make them more powerful, especially in the example that they mentioned with thrusting. There's really no benefit to having mass behind a thrust. That's not true. But in the case of like dedicated thrusting weapons, like a rapier, mass is not going to help you. Mass is only going to hurt you. Now, if you're talking about like a lance on horseback, that's kind of a different case. And you're not thrusting it so much as you're, bracing it with your arm and then using the horse's momentum to slam it through somebody. Anyway, let's move on. So weight distribution and inertia. This is important for swings. Unlike thrusts, swing speed is affected not only by weight, but also by the distribution of weight around the pivot point of the swing. Increasing the weight may increase the damage with certain boundaries, but it will also increase the inertia, meaning that more energy would be required to achieve sufficient speed on impact. Thus, these weapons will typically be slower, and increasing the weight will only positively affect damage up to a certain point. Again, that's not necessarily true. Heavier weapons are going to be harder to accelerate, but because of the centripetal force in a swing, once you accelerate them, they're actually going to maintain that inertia better than a light weapon would. So, yes and no. I mean, once you get a giant warhammer swinging, it could be swinging faster and hitting harder than a lighter weapon. Yes, it's easier for you to swing that lighter weapon, but the heavier weapon is going to maintain its inertia better. So it really depends. And I don't find their explanations here super satisfactory, but I get they're trying to be concise, and so they're not able to say maybe exactly what they wanted to say. Anyways, so after deriving these physical properties, we then use them to determine the weapon's swing and thrust speed. Doing this with perfect precision would be rather difficult since we would have to take into account all the motions a fencer goes through, all the muscles that are involved, their performance limits, and etc. We simplify all of this with a basic model where we assume the fencer is made up of 3 simple motors. One motor representing the legs and hips, For example, or excuse me, one for the chest and shoulder, and one for the arm and wrist. We then run a simulation where the motors work together to speed up the weapon until it hits the target. Actually, we run 2 simulations, one for swing and one for thrust. After these steps, we get the length, mass, swing, and thrust speed of the crafted weapon. But there's still a rather interesting problem of determining its damage. ... And that's actually the end of this. Pretty short blog entry, but this is going to be a multi-parter. And then we get a little bit of a look at the user interface for crafting weapons. So these, I can't click on this, I don't think. I don't know if OBS will continue to show it. If I click on it, let me see. So if I click on that, oh, it's going to open in a new window, so you guys still can't see it. Oh, wait, actually, yes, you can. Perfect. So we'll go ahead and analyze this a little bit more, since that was a pretty short entry. So at the top, we see that we can change the name of our weapon. So while crafting the weapon, you can, of course, come up with a custom name. Then we have all the various parts of said weapon arranged along the left-hand bar there. So we have like the grip, the pommel, the blade, and the handguard. And that's for a sword. There are, different sword or different weapon types, excuse me, which is what we would get into on the drop-down menu underneath either tab. So I'm not sure what they're defining as primary and secondary, but we do know that just about every type of melee weapon is going to be able for customization, as well as I believe throwing weapons. I know that I've seen in certain gameplay videos when they were sort of scrolling through this system, there's a few gameplay videos where they actually create weapons and then they go around and use them. And I'm pretty sure I've seen the ability to customize javelins. So that's kind of cool. I don't know if I saw throwing axes, but definitely, regular melee axes. And, all sorts of swords and polearms. So we'll have quite a few options. I'm not sure just how many different parts we'll have to choose from initially, because it was my understanding that some of them are going to be unlocked by they didn't really specify what, but they said that certain ones are going to be unique to certain cultures, which again is going to be the cultures of the various factions in the game. And it was sort of implied that you would be able to unlock different cultural parts by visiting or maybe doing stuff for those different cultures. So you may have like access to everything out of the gate, or you might only have like a set number of generic parts, or you might just have like, I don't know, maybe 1 or 2 really basic things, and then you have to unlock everything else. We don't really know yet, but we can see all the other stats here, and this is going to change in real time as you update your weapon. So you'll actually be able to see, okay, if I put this blade on it, what will reach be, what will the thrust speed and swing speed be. I want a faster weapon, would this blade be better, or this blade be better? Or maybe you want a heavier, higher damage output weapon, so you can kind of mix and match parts until you get there. And obviously you'll be able to just sort of, make it look cool as well, if that's what you're more concerned with. But for those who want to like min-max based on their fighting style, you'll have the ability to do that too. So anyways, I think we'll leave it here. Again, this was kind of short and not really what I would have hoped for. If they're going to do something like this, I'd like to see a lot more information on the actual customization process. Maybe take us through, again, all the stuff I just speculated on, or just show us more about the various types of weapons, rather than going through the nitty-gritty calculations, which is important, but maybe not worth an entire blog post, or certainly not several. But anyways, let me know what you guys think in the comments below. Thank you so much for watching. I had a great time talking about some Bannerlord with you, as I always do, and I look forward to seeing you guys back here for the next video.